Hey guys, Buildzoid here, and today I want to complain about running the channel. Because several months ago, actually probably like more than half a year ago, I had a really demotivational realization. And this happened because of all of the like Intel degradation and voltage regulation issues. Because I made a bunch of videos about that, right? A whole bunch of them. And a lot of them were extremely low effort on my part. Like, I basically just turned on the camera and just ranted for however long I felt like it. And at the end of sort of all of those videos, like focusing on the Intel degradation and voltage regulation issues, I made one video that I put a lot of effort into, at least by my standards of putting effort into things. Um, which is the video where I explain explain how Intel's voltage regulation system for LGA 1700 works and why it has a tendency to kill CPUs. Um, that video did significantly worse than a lot of the other videos about the Intel degradation stuff, right? Like, I have it up on the screen next to me. That video got 18,000 views. Some of the other videos, and admittedly, that video was like an hour and 40 minutes long, so I can kind of understand how it wouldn't have that many views. But for comparison, there's a 58-minute long video testing one of the microcodes that has 22,000 views. There's another video testing one of the microcodes that has 21,000 views. There's one about how you don't have to turn off CEP to undervolt the CPU that has 36,000 views. Intel default settings, disabling something that has 72,000 views. So, but it gets worse. The one about like turning off the Intel default settings, disabling it disables the core voltage limit. That one has 72,000 views. That one's 15 minutes long. So, okay, that one's pretty short. But then there's then there's like the original rant about Intel instability, which is an hour and 7 minutes, 93,000 views. Oh, and then there's the rambling one where I pull up like the Minecraft servers. That one has like 72,000 views. There's a 2-hour video probing the O125 microcode with 48,000 views. So basically, the low effort trash, as I would consider it, gets anywhere from 2 to 3 times as many views as the one video where I really tried to explain why this happens. And the thing is, like, I looked at that, like, at the time I saw that and I was like, man, why do I even try? And since then, I've sort of realized that this actually kind of applies to a lot of my content. A perfect example is the PCB breakdown videos. When I first started this channel, it started pretty much with PCB breakdown videos. And when I first started doing them, they were a lot shorter than they are now. Why were they so much shorter back then? Well, I now know more about power delivery and PCBs than I ever did before. So when I first started doing PCB breakdowns, I couldn't spend several minutes talking about capacitors because I didn't know enough stuff about capacitors to talk about them for several minutes. The same is true for MOSFETs and power stages and really every component of a motherboard or GPU. I just didn't know as much, so the videos were shorter because I couldn't talk about as much. And the frustrating thing for me is that the shorter videos would probably get more views, right? So it's like, honestly, idiot Buildzoid would have probably been more successful in the views department. Which is just like that's just, very frustrating and demotivational. And yeah, and that's pretty much like the whole rant summed up. And other examples of this is like my favorite piece of test equipment that I own is the oscilloscope, which admittedly got featured pretty heavily in the like Intel videos. But I don't feel Like, I don't know how responsible the oscilloscope is for the success of the Intel videos. The thing is, I could have pulled off that same, like, the same measurements that I did for the Intel videos. I could have done that with my older oscilloscope, which was significantly cheaper. Like, the one I'm so happy about, the one I absolutely adore, is a Rigol HDO 1104. It's great. It has an HDMI output. It's amazing. I don't have to point a webcam at it to, show waveforms and stuff. But for the purposes of the Intel videos, I could have just used the Rigol, what is it, 1054Z? That would have delivered the same kind of measurements that I was showing for the Intel videos. So, that's again kind of disappointing. Um and like and most of the other videos that I make that feature the oscilloscope, like, they're incredibly unpopular, even by my channel's standards, which is like, I can get it. I can understand it. Like, ultimately, most people are interested in gaming hardware, so, GPUs and motherboards, and overclocking are probably gamers, and unfortunately, if it doesn't measure FPS, they're not interested. And the oscilloscope can measure a great many things, but FPS is not one of them. Actually, that's not true. For GPUs specifically, you can actually count the frame rate from the oscilloscope. But that's not its primary purpose, and that's certainly not what I use it for. But yeah, like, I could count the frame rate. And so, yeah. So that's just kind of been my frustration. Another thing is that, like, well, okay, it's not recent anymore, but it came up on a live stream that, like, oh, Buildzoid, you could, like, parallelize the memory stress testing. And it's like, yep, that's true. I could parallelize the memory stress testing. But what would that even achieve? Because, like, I'm not very good at the whole, like, making clickable, watchable videos side of things. So it's like, okay, I'll just end up with even more data, and now what? Like, what am I gonna do with it? It feels like, oh, like I'm worried that it'll end up like the oscilloscope situation where it's like, man, I love the oscilloscope, but it is very expensive. Um, I mean, yeah, like, but I still love it. Like, honestly, I wouldn't trade the oscilloscope for. I would not trade the oscilloscope for a 5090. Or if I did, I would sell the 5090 and buy another scope and keep the money left over. Yeah. Um, so, you know, um, but at the same time, like, I'm worried that, oh, if I, like, go out of my way to set up something to parallelize all of the memory stress testing, like, it's going to require extra power supplies, extra coolers, probably. I'm not sure. I might have enough coolers to throw something together, but I'm not 100% certain on that. Like, it's going to require some extra hardware. Is it actually going to translate into more views? I kind of doubt it, because, like, basically anything that I've, like, do a bunch of research into motherboards and PCBs and power delivery. The videos are longer. They take more time and effort to record than ever before. Views are arguably the same, if not worse. Get fancy oscilloscope. Videos that are really focused on the capabilities of the oscilloscope generally are my worst performing videos by far. So it kind of feels like, oh, bend over backwards to parallelize memory stress testing. At best, it's not, like, I feel like at best it's just going to not translate into any more viewership. And then it's like, well, then why the hell did I bother? Right? Like, evidently, the only truly successful content I get is when some manufacturer makes some incredibly boneheaded design decision, and then I get to make a video about, yeah, your design decision is freaking stupid. I'm, of course, referencing NVIDIA's stupid power connector, also Intel's dumb voltage regulation system. And, there was Asus at one point got a capacitor backwards. I had a video about that. Which was also quite successful. Then there's also the, like, RTX 3090, New World situation, I made a couple videos about that. Those were pretty successful, but these are all like these are videos I'd rather not make, right? Like I'd much rather live in a world where Intel didn't design a voltage standard that has a tendency to kill CPUs, and Nvidia didn't design a power connector that has a tendency to melt, and like these aren't good things. These aren't fun to make videos about. It's just disappointing. Right? It's just like I get to sit there and go like, "Yep, that's a pretty stupid power connector." Why would you do that? It's a $2,000 GPU. Why wouldn't you give it a better power connector? Why a worse one? Right? Um, like the card is so damn expensive. You could have literally like added a whole bunch of extra monitoring circuitry to avoid all of the flaws of the new power connector, and it's just like, nope, garbage power connector. Um, and you know, and like on the flip side, if manufacturers weren't constantly making boneheaded decisions, I guess I wouldn't have a lot of my most successful content. But that's just still like I just still find that extremely disappointing. Where it's just like I wish I didn't make that. Like I wish I did. Like I wouldn't. It's not like I need to make that content, but like I care about hardware, right? Like I'll buy broken GPUs on eBay to repair them. Um, so it like I find it frustrating when I see just expensive components destroyed by stupid design decisions. Like especially and there's another video that like I wanted to make before the Nvidia power connector thing, um, where like a lot of these design decisions, I'd be less annoyed if you had a boneheaded power connector on a GPU that's $300 and is irrelevant in 2 years, right? But like a lot of the hardware these days, and this is going completely off topic for this video, but a lot of the hardware, like especially the high-end GPUs, they're like over $1,000. These things are insanely expensive. Performance progress has slowed down to a crawl. If you bought a 3080 Ti or a 4080 or a 5080 or a 5090, 2 years later, it's still relevant in terms of performance. It's not like a GTX 580, which got completely annihilated by a GTX 680. And the 680 was completely irrelevant compared to a GTX 980 that came out a couple years later, right? And the GTX 980 was made, well, I don't think the 1080 made it completely obsolete, but, your GTX 980 was pretty obsolete after a GTX 1080 came out. Or if you had a GTX 970 by the time a 1070 came out, like, yeah, it's like you're just buying a 1070 instead. Like, but you buy a 3080 Ti, and like the 4080 is faster, but it's not that much faster. And if you have a 4080, it's like the 5080 is barely an upgrade. Like, it's barely an upgrade, right? And so considering how slow progress is on a lot of like modern hardware and how expensive it is, and then seeing these just completely stupid design decisions is just like, why? So that's my justification for making those videos. Because it's just like, because like, yeah, I don't have to make them, but like, I do find it just incredibly disappointing that like the hardware is more expensive than ever. It's less disposable relatively. Like I'd say, yeah, it's like less disposable than it used to be. And it's built worse. They're building it worse. And it's just like, why? Right? A 14900K also, like if your 14900K dies, at least Intel, I don't know how good they are about actually replacing those CPUs, but Intel did promise that they would replace all of them. And the thing is but like your 14900K dies, let's say outside the warranty period, what are you replacing it with? A 285K? That's like in a lot of situations that's potentially a downgrade. Like, so yeah. Um, and so I do like, so the fact that like my regular so I'm just generally frustrated at a lot of things, but on the content creation side, I am very specifically frustrated about the fact of like, oh, I put all this effort and do all this research and just, you know, buy expensive equipment, and then at the end of the day, all of that just translates into nothing. And especially with the PCB breakdowns, like it does feel like Buildzoid from 9 years ago, the idiot he was, would have been getting more views on the PCB breakdown specifically, not on a lot of the other stuff, because would I have been able to figure out what was going on with Intel CPUs at the time? Probably. Actually, maybe not. Yeah, no. 9 years ago, I don't think I'd understand what is going on with Intel's voltage regulation. Um, Too stupid for that. But, especially like with the PCB breakdowns, idiot Buildzoid would have been getting more views because his videos would have been shorter. Um, and that's just disappointing. That's just extremely disappointing and demotivational and just like, man, why do I even bother? And then also the fact that like it's just like we go from one stupid design decision to another. Like Intel can't figure out how to keep their CPUs from melting. Nvidia can't figure out how to keep a power connector from melting. Um, anyway, so that's kind of it for this video. It's not like anything's gonna change. I just wanted to be whiny YouTuber for just over 15 minutes. I'll hit the stop button. Um, and then I'll go work on a PCB breakdown, which will probably be an hour. Anyway, thanks for watching, and goodbye.